Everyone's coming on in here. Good morning, good afternoon. I guess 12 o'clock on the dot, everyone who's joining us. I'm Nina Johnson, and I'm here with James English Leary to talk about his exhibition Patter, which opens at my gallery here in Miami, Florida tomorrow. Since it's Miami, we're going to give people about 3 minutes to get on. And just for everyone to know, we're recording the chat. It'll be available later as a video, so if anyone has to jump out early, they can get that. And also, if anyone has any questions for James, we're gonna open it up to questions at the end, but sometimes folks are shy on Zoom, so feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll make sure to ask them on your behalf as we go through. So I love how on time everyone is. I know we must have some good Midwesterners here that are not Miami people.
All that. There's my parents.
Oh, hi, parents.
Hi.
I told James I was so happy you were coming.
Yeah, we are too. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, I said I'm a mom too, so I really love seeing a mom RSVP on there.
James.
Hey, James.
Hey, Ellen.
Ellen.
Hi, Jan. Hi, John.
Hi.
That looks like a familiar background to me, James.
Yeah, you know where I am.
Hey, Marcy. Can't see you, but you're here. Hi, Marcy. Okay.
Wow, everyone knows each other.
Bonnie. Hey, Bonnie.
Let's see, we have a few more guests coming in now. So for everyone who's just joining us, I'm Nina Johnson, and I'm here speaking with James English Leary on the occasion of his solo exhibition, Patter, which opens at my gallery in Miami, Florida tomorrow. It's 12:03, and everyone is so on time. I think we're going to start at 12:05, which might be the most on-time start for any Miami gallery event ever. And as I was saying to some of our folks that joined early, if anyone has questions, I'm going to actually mute everyone with the exception of James and myself. And if you have any questions, you can add them to the chat, and we'll also open it up to questions at the end. And just so everyone knows, again, we're recording and we will post a video of this to our YouTube. So if anyone has to leave early, we understand. We won't be mad at you, except for James's parents. You guys can't leave early. James, how's your Wi-Fi holding up over there?
Seems okay. Not the most robust, but seems like we'll be able to eke this out.
We'll survive. We'll survive.
Yeah, we will.
I know we had a few more folks who had RSVP'd, so we'll just wait another minute before we start, just in case.
I have some little notes. I have some little notes I made.
You have notes. I have notes too. All right, everyone.
Slips of paper.
So we're gonna get started. So first of all, James, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. It's no stand-in for having the real you here. So we'll have to make up for that at some point down the line, but I'm happy that we get the chance to talk about this new body of work. So this is James's first solo show at the gallery, though we've known each other for some time. And James is a close cohort of many artists that we've worked with, including Nicholas Lobo and Seth Cameron. and some others, I think, too, but we'll just keep you in that group of guys. So Patter is a body of work that, James, tell me, when did you start working on this particular group of paintings?
This is all pandemic era work, all from the last year. So it was all made out of my kind of normal day-to-day, out of my studio in New York. I made it in a 2-car garage in Chicago, where I spent the better part of the year. And yeah, I think it's a little, the scale, I mean, there are some subtle things that happened as a result of that, like the scale kind of, tightened a little bit, and there was a little bit of compression that came out of working in this other smaller, more more domestic space, which I think ended up being really good for the work. I had been working at a slightly, not really a different scale, but at just a slightly bigger, slightly more, slightly less compressed scale before this.
James, I wanna talk about the shift in scale, because I noticed it for sure. And then there's also a range of sizes that are all sort of like subtly different in the show. But before we do that, I wanna kind of backpedal a little bit for some people that might be joining us or watching later that aren't familiar with your background. So interrupt me when I get something wrong, but you are a founding member of the Bruce High Quality Foundation, which was formed during your time at the Cooper Union. And the Bruce was a group of artists that ostensibly created a fictional artist and then killed him off and created a fictional estate foundation that managed his output and comings and goings in the world. And then you guys formed a free school in response to Cooper's beginning to charge tuition a number of years ago. And then one of the things that I think is really interesting that happened with all you radical guys is many of you, yourself included, said, I want to make some paintings. So I want to talk about your sort of shifts and this sort of shift from a much more like out in the world, collaborative, almost political undertaking to a much more hermetic, like you described it, making paintings in the garage during the pandemic, but also like earlier, the like first shift into painting for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said that all really concisely and nicely. And, I spent most of my 20s, I guess, working in this kind of like institutional satirical framework where, that was really rooted in working with this group of people and thinking about and making things in a kind of conceptual institutional way, writing histories and thinking about starting, kind of organizations. And we started a school and I mean, that kind of work is so wonderful. And I think what was interesting about what we were doing is that we really tried to bring like a kind of art making approach to these institutional problems, like what would a school look like if it was also an artwork, but at the end of the day, like thinking in terms of institutions and history and ideology and all of that is just not the same thing as making personal artworks. And I think yeah, I don't know. I remember like having certain I had always made paintings, and since I was a teenager, and when I was at Cooper, I was making paintings and kind of made paintings, you know, in a sort of subdued way through all the Bruce High Quality stuff. But I think at a certain point, it's hard to not, if you're doing sort of institutional work, it's hard to not start thinking about things in those terms. And I remember having certain experiences, probably like around the time of the big de Kooning retrospective at the MoMA. So I don't remember when that was, 2011 maybe, that were just like big, you know, sort of remembering what it was like to look at paintings and have this, you know, very personal experience of really looking at something and assessing your own experience, which is just different than sitting around the table and, you know, developing, you know, a strong, albeit like creative or hilarious group consensus idea about what to do in a collaboration. So I don't know, yeah, for maybe 7 or 8 years, I've sort of been like primarily focused on making paintings again. And I think it's, you know, where I've always sort of wanted to be, although I love teaching, and I think it's been really important for me to have this venue where I was able to engage with like these big questions about, you know, art history and the pedagogy of art, and how to think about teaching art, and how to think about making organizations for artists. But I don't see those things as having a clear one-to-one relationship. I think that they have an inherently uneasy relationship, like the questions about how to make institutions that work well for artists on the one hand, and how to make a painting on the other, are just totally different kinds of ways of thinking.
I think about it, we had a few folks that just joined us, so I just want to fill them in that James was discussing his previous work as a founding member of the Bruce High Quality Foundation, and his transition sort of back into kind of a pure painting, you know, a role as like a pure painter, and a kind of emotional like need almost. You know, I love the idea of you visiting this de Kooning show and having like a, you know, this feeling of like your gut kind of pulling you back into something that maybe in your 20s you felt like you could conceptualize your way out of, or kind of outsmart, you know. Like I think that's so much what the Bruces did, was sort of like outsmart our emotional connection to object making, you know, kind of like the pure joy of that. So, you know, you've been making really like this body of work for 7 or 8 years, which is like quite some time. Tell us a little bit about, I'm going to scroll down to a few individual works. I think this is the piece in the show, this cameo offering of the squished head, the egg head, that relates most to the first work, the first paintings that I saw of yours. Tell us a little bit about the silhouettes and the shaped canvases, and how you got to this.
Yeah, I think, I mean, there's like different, I guess there's different threads. I mean, I think figuration has always been really important to me. I'm just really drawn to, you know, the figure, the body, the face, and, you know, paintings that sort of enter into some characterological or dramatic space that seem to like call up stories or ideas about mental states. And so I think that these heads that use this silhouette form are sort of about I think that they're sort of about like creating maybe a sort of dramatization of a certain kind of mental state or mental action, like the way that the head becomes a kind of cropped window where you see into this world where there's some action happening. And there, you know, in this one, there's like this hand reaching in to the head with this little, you know, egg head thing. And I don't know, I don't have a clear idea, obviously, of what that action is, but it seems like there's something really rich in the grammar of a bodily superimposition of like this hand coming into a head or something. It's like almost like a homunculus where these you know, body parts get sort of superimposed through each other, and then there's some idea of a mental action or a dawning awareness or something. I mean, I think they're also, you know, supposed to have a kind of lightness or humor. I think how they kind of embody like maybe they trigger some idea of psychology, but they're very camp. It's like a camp psychology, like you'd have in you know, a lot of kind of popular entertainment. You know, in my head, these silhouettes are the story I tell myself about a lot of them is that they're sort of about this narrative of like a kind of, or a satire of a dawning awareness, you know, like someone, the kind of folly of watching someone slowly realize something, maybe, if that isn't too like personal and subjective and far out.
No, I mean, we're here for the personal, subjective, and far out. If not, we wouldn't want to talk to you.
Well, there has to be some limit on how, you know, how far out you get, because you think about some crazy stuff sometimes. But yeah, I don't know. I see these head things as sort of like I mean, I think all the work in this show is sort of somehow about creating a kind of like a sort of slapstick depiction of a cognitive action or an interpretive state or a dawning thought. Like they, I think, are supposed to invoke like the experience of realizing something or, you know, paying attention to something, but in a way that is like heightened and buoyant and funny and campy, where the psychology is campy.
I loved how once we installed them in the gallery, I love this one, by the way. I just think this one is so good. It's so good. I mean, it's so good for so many reasons. Like, it's hilarious. And I sort of just like think of this gesture and how absurd it is. But I also like formally, I like how tense the hand feels inside this head. Like it's like out of place. Like the proportion is so mismatched of the hand to the head. But I also, you know, when we installed these in the show, they're so directional because of the fingers, you know, like the pointed fingers. And they reminded me of some of your earlier work that was purely abstract, that were shaped canvases, but they were, you know, not hands or heads or whatever. I mean, maybe implied, but like it was certainly not as directed as these are. So tell us a little bit about, I mean, certainly in the context of 2020, I think we can have like a very literal reading of the pointed finger and like the red and blue heads. But I think for you, this is something that has shown up before then and will continue to exist after it. So tell us a little bit about this gesture.
Yeah, I mean, the pointing finger, I think like you have to acknowledge the Guston in that. There's like a thing in Guston, a trope of this pointing finger, this hand and this pointing finger that feels like a big enough part of art history that like the pointing finger, the hand with the pointing finger, that's also kind of like cartoony. I mean, I think there's like a very strong debt theft from Guston. And so for me, it's like and in his work, it always feels connected to this exigency of a, horrible political reality in America and all this like nightmare of all those Guston paintings. But it's not, it's not just that. Like, I think that these, these pointing finger, with this inset profile of this looking face paintings are sort of about creating, there's this, there's something about like the directional pointing finger that also feels like it's connected to looking at things and attention being directed at something, that feels also like a metaphor that can really be opened up to a lot of ideas about experience and ideas about, looking at art. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that those pointing finger works are, feel in this moment like they're maybe connected to some sort of exigency of circumstances and being startled and paying attention and all of those things. But I think that they're also just about the way that redundancy of pointing and looking can kind of be compressed into some, really collapsed and compressed.
Because they, uh-oh, did I lose you? Are you frozen?
Can you hear me?
James and I have an emergency plan. I can hear you again.
Can you hear me?
You're back. You're back.
Okay.
We have an emergency cell phone plan if we lose him. But they also, I mean, one of the things that I love too is that they like push you outside of the painting, which I think is so great. And like talking about Guston, something that you've said so often, you like said it in our press release and you said it in the Brooklyn Rail interview, which is like that your work is about how awkward it is to have a body. And, there's that sort of such a Guston thing. But also I was, thinking of it in the context of being a white man in America, this year to inhabit that body. I mean, it's something, I was saying to your mom, like, I love having a mom here because I'm a mom and I happen to be the mom of two white boys. And I think a lot about what it means for them to inhabit such a like problematic space, like how as a conscientious person can you inhabit this figure? And I think in a lot of these paintings, the face is kind of like startled to be there. Like the face is like sort of surprised of its own circumstance. And then the finger is like immediately like pushing the viewer outside of it. Like it's immediately telling you to like look elsewhere, as captivating as the image is, and when you're in the space, what happens is what it does is just like push you onto the next painting, like it pushes you kind of in this like cyclical space around the room.
Yeah, they're very deflecting.
Yeah, exactly. Like don't don't mull in my space or something, like don't mull within like the problematics of this like blue-eyed white face.
Mm.
So, but I kind of want you to talk about this, like how awkward it is to have a body, because it's come up so often, you know, like they're your words that you've used frequently. So I think obviously it's like very important to you. So tell us a little bit. And I heard you say something to your roommate that you probably, I don't know if you do or don't want everyone here to hear, but you said, I don't sleep with pillows. I just push them to the side, which like the gesture of you pushing the pillows away from your head in the context of this body of work is like too good not to bring up right now.
Yeah, well, I guess, I mean, I remember when I was first thinking about that a lot, it was sort of when I started, was sort of when I started making these shaped paintings, and it was when I was quitting smoking. I remember that being really unpleasant. And I remember just having this feeling that, you know, making paintings, really building paintings was a way to get outside of my body and get outside of this uncomfortable, unpleasant exercise of quitting smoking. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think everyone's relationship to their body is probably different. But I think, depictions of the figure within a rectangle tend to posit some kind of relationship between a figure and an environment, and there's usually some sort of philosophical position about experience born out of the depiction of a figure within a certain kind of space, and depending on how that figure is depicted in that space. And I do think there's something inherently awkward and unruly and funny and about these shaped works that don't have a very different relationship to space. Like they are not involved in this sort of the picture as a window into a world, Renaissance idea of picture space. And it's more about, the body itself becoming a crop or a bounding edge on the picture plane. And so, they start to take on, I mean, as you said, their relationship to the space around them and the way they deflect and refer to each other, all seems like they're both like more, they're simultaneously like more and less self-contained, I guess. I think, yeah.
Sorry, you also said that we asked you to give us some influences, and I loved what you gave us, which was Elizabeth Murray, Alfred Hitchcock, and Ettore Sotsas. And I think of Sotsas so much when I look at these works in the space, because, I mean, the paintings are like these sort of post-pop objects that are very like designed in a certain way, like the way I wanted to show this image so that everyone could see, because this is something that's new in the work. They're not a double panel that's braced. So like the edge of the painting is really uncanny. It creates a shadow on the wall that mimics the like airbrush quality of the hand in the painting itself. So they sort of like hover in space. They're like these aliens that are like dropped in seemingly from like a digital world into the real world. And that's a very like a Memphis gesture, you know, that the world, how can you come back from like the devastation of the Second World War in Europe? Like, how can the body as we know it possibly survive that? It has to reinvent itself as something as absurd as its condition. And I think these are doing that same thing. They've sort of been like sucked out of like a digital space or like some kind of like digital idea of what the body looks like. And here they hover on the wall. And you're right, they're not a window. They're sort of the opposite of that. They're like slick and deflective. And that answers so beautifully to this question of like, why do our bodies feel so awkward in the world? Because fundamentally the world is broken in a way where our bodies can no longer be copacetic within it, you know? Something that people kept saying repeatedly last year was how good they felt in nature, you know, that they like had to just disconnect from the news or whatever and stand in the grass or go outside, and that was a kind of like a reminder of something like a space they should be. And I think we have broken that connection, you know, like we don't know where our body fits organically. It's somehow like the opposite of like an Ana Mendieta, you know, laying in the mud, like the body is so dissolved into its ground. Well, that's a very like non-segue to my next question, which was about humor, because it's like sort of not humorous at all. Do you think these, when you look at these works, kind of collectively, I mean, I'm so sad that like you can't see them in person all together, because I know you did make them under the constraints of seeing them, you know, kind of individually, and they have come alive in such a magical way, like in the space on the wall together, standing before them, thinking about the scale. Do you think of these as, I don't see them as being especially funny when I look at them. You know, I feel them in a much more kind of poignant way. It's been really funny over the past couple of days. We got a few kind of reactive responses to the show preview, aside from the very good ones that we've gotten and all of that, but some like really visceral, like, you know, bordering on like hate mail or something. Like they like generated something in people, which I was like really excited to see this morning. I like really welcome that. How do you, like, when you look at them, what do you, like, do you see a vulnerability? Do you see something more humorous, like, or you see all of these things together?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, humor, I think, like, for me, humor is not really about like writing a joke or actively trying to make something funny. I think humor is about letting something happen. And I think, you know, different people have, you know, different artists have different relationship to humor. And there are artists that can deploy deliberate humor in a, you know, incredible way and like write a joke that's hilarious and do it on purpose and structure it. And, you know, I don't, these are obviously not like, you know, funny or whatever. I think it's more a situation of just, I think for me in general, like humor comes from not censoring a certain kind of impulse that I happen to have in response to a lot of things, just naturally. And I've made work where I felt I needed to, censor that. And I just think that the work feels more interesting when I don't suppress, those impulses. So, but yeah, I don't, it's not funny. There's a lot of different valences to humor, and sometimes things are funny because they seem so, because they're, sometimes things are funny because they're stupid in a way that's good. Sometimes things are funny because they're so perfect, like a perfectly written sentence that describes something that you know to be true but have never heard articulated so well, can be, to me, very funny, because it's this almost just miraculous feeling of something snapping into place that feels somehow like it can be really funny. Things obviously, that are uncomfortable, are funny, and maybe there's something about the paintings, both in their, like, dumb anatomicalness, and also their sort of like obvious or overbearing constructedness, that could produce that kind of humor or funniness. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think, like, what you said about Memphis is really great. And I guess, like, one of the things, I had never really thought about it like this before, but I guess one of the things that Elizabeth Murray and Memphis have strongly in common is they incorporate a lot of, like, high modernist art language, ideas about, the quality of construction and of discovery and of, like a really contained, transcendent art object having the potential to do a certain kind of thing, which is sort of like modernist idea. But they let in all of this, like, bad stuff or bad taste or stupid stuff or outrageous stuff. A lot of Elizabeth Murray's paintings are great, not in spite of, but because of how ugly she's willing to make them. And I don't mean ugly in a pejorative sense. It's like she knows what she's doing, and, like, works those paintings in this way that is, at times, like, really crusty and bizarre and strange and ugly. But I think so much of the freedom of the work is about letting all that stuff in, letting this freaky, outrageous, funny, ugly, rough-hewn stuff into these really, really considered, elegant modernist objects.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what is so impactful when you're in front of these objects, like in front of these paintings. And it's funny, they do have to me, like a quite, like, distinct bridge to more of what I've seen in the collectible design world and people working with functional objects. There's a kind of freedom there to embrace that I don't see with as much regularity in the art world, particularly in painting, because there's this sort of reluctance to let go of the artist's own ego and making the work, that, like, they so desperately want it to be serious, the, like, autonomous art object. And in design, actually, this has become a whole movement, right? Like Katie Stout and Misha Khan and, the New York Times piece, like the ugly designers, kind of melding the grotesque with this sort of, like, let them eat cake sense of, like, gold and materiality and bronze and, like, these really exquisite materials being used to describe like a broken, melted system. And I think I was so happy to see this change in the structure of the works, because I think, so for anyone that doesn't know some of James' earlier shaped canvases, there was a kind of like behind the curtain when you saw the side of them, where the image was really quite perfect. And then on the edge, you would see the construction of this thing. And with these, there's no, like, you haven't allowed for that. And I think it works really well. So I think probably many people are not going to be shy in this group if we ask for questions. Does anyone have questions before we run out of time here? If you do have questions, all you have to do is unmute yourself and ask away. And I'm sure James would be happy to answer. Let's see. Does anyone have questions? I can never tell. I think I see someone typing in the chat box, but I'm going to stop the screen share so that we can answer those.
I think that question about the relationship between painting and design is really interesting. And I think it's been happening for a long time. I mean, I think like Frank Stella is having that conversation in his work where there's like a, you know, very clear schematic system that's laid out, and then he executes it and makes the painting.
Totally.
And, you know, those paintings are interesting because they straddle like a design strategy with like this beautiful painting with shapes and colors and brushstrokes. But they're very like schematic. I mean, he's very cold in terms of how, you know, how he talks about painting them as like a kind of fabrication. He gets like the brush at the width that he wants the band of color to be. He gets the right materials. You can picture him like getting a paint roller and roll it. You know, he kind of like builds the painting rather than like finding the painting through painting the painting.
Yeah, he executes it or fabricates it somehow.
It's a distinction that I think like, you know, a lot of painters have been contemplating for, you know, like a while, 50 years, maybe, at least since, you know, minimalism, I guess, or.
I don't know. Everyone is more shy than I thought. So I think so I will share this one thing before we go, because I think it's interesting with what we were just talking about with design. There's another show that's up at the gallery right now. And to be honest, I had not thought of it in any way as being, this was not planned, basically is what I'm trying to say, related to your work, but it's an exhibition of vessels. And there's a number of artists, both historic and contemporary, in the show. But there's this Sotsas piece, which is from 2006. It is from the last body of work that he made in his life. So he died in 2007, and the last group of works he made were a series of 30 glass vessels that he made in 2006. He started working with Murano glass in the 1970s. And I was showing someone your exhibition and then in this space this morning. And I just felt like there was such a wonderful dialogue between these two things. This is two separate pieces of glass. So like the yellow tube is independent from the clear body. And, you know, because this is late in his life, it's sort of untethered from the more fabricated type works that you saw earlier in his work, the like really precise laminate. It has all this kind of like rough aluminum in it, but yeah, I wanted to share that with everyone because I felt like there was a nice kind of family relationship there. James, is there anything that you'd like to share before we go? Anything I missed?
I mean, I think we covered some good ground. I feel like we hit a lot of good points.
Quite well, we're ahead. The Wi-Fi has not gone out. We've been crystal clear. Oh, I see a question here.
I was a little late, and I'm wondering if we could get a video of the presentation, the people that were attending. Is that possible?
Yes, absolutely. So we are going to, when this is over, it will be uploaded to YouTube. So it'll be on the gallery YouTube page by the end of the day. And yeah, I'm happy that you joined us, and you'll be able to see whatever you missed online after.
Thank you. That's great. Thanks.
No problem. And then also, just so everyone knows, the images from the show are up on our website. It's just ninajohnson.com. If anyone is local in Miami, we are open regular hours Tuesday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. And we just ask that visitors wear masks and practice social distancing when they're in the galleries. We have good outdoor space and 3 different galleries, so plenty of room to do that. And if anyone would like additional documentation beyond what's available on the site, just feel free to reach out to us, and we'll get it to you. But James, it's a wonderful show. It feels very alive in a moment when everything feels a little bit dead and distant. And it's really wonderfully reflective and intense, and it is kind of funny in the best way, in all the ways we talked about before. So thank you so much, and thank you to everyone for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Nina. Thanks a lot.
Congratulations, James.
Yeah, thanks. Good to see everybody.
Congrats. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, everyone.